Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. In the video today, we're going to talk about a recent issue we had with Logic Apps Standard and the key vault reference when it was broken. So what we've got going on here is we've got a workflow that's executed. We had an issue with this shape here. So I can see over on the right here, we've got the details of the call. Now I'm using managed identity plus an API key for the security to call my API management. And the error that we're getting is that the key's not accepted. Now, what we've got to notice here is where I'd expect to see the actual key, we can see we've got this string, which is indicating there's a key vault reference. So there's something not right about the key vault reference and the string that's appearing and being used for the API key. So let's take a look a bit more into that. So here I've gone over into my Logic Apps Standard, and I think I'm slightly off the bottom of this menu actually, but we're looking at the app settings here, and I've got this one that's my subscription key for APIM. So how I've implemented this is I've used a parameter in the workflow. Under the hood, that parameter is using the expression to read an app setting, and it should be coming from this value here. Now, the important bit to notice is over here, our key vault reference is showing up that it's got a problem. Now, this has been working in the test environment fine for ages. Somehow this has started getting an error, and the question is what's happened that made this start getting an error. Now, if we click on that little link for the key vault, we'll open this up and you can see over here we've got the reference was not able to be resolved. Now, I know in Key Vault the secret's still there, so my assumption is that at some point the workflow has been working fine. Logic Apps must occasionally recheck under the hood to see if that key's been updated. Somehow there must be some kind of DNS issue connecting to the Key Vault. So the problem here is that the Key Vault reference wasn't resolved. Now, what's interesting is the way Logic App handles this is instead of throwing an error that breaks your workflow in a really obvious way, what it's supplying back here is if we go back a couple of slides, you can see it's just supplying the string, which is the pointer to look up in Key Vault instead of giving us some arbitrary value or throwing an error that it couldn't read the reference. So the app service just given a completely different value here. Now, obviously that breaks my call to the API. Now, how I fix that, the first thing is how do you fix it? So over here, we've got refresh latest values, and you can see when I click that, obviously it goes and refreshes from the key vault, gets the latest one, and this point in time, it could resolve the key vault, and that worked, and everything's back up and running okay. Now, what's quite interesting here at this point is how would we spot that this issue was going on? Because we started getting some workflow errors, which is great, but actually we don't really know much about the key vault not being healthy. So I think that's one gap. We may need to think about how we would monitor that. But what we were doing here is the way we kind of detecting this is in our so if I jump further on, in our Turbo 360, so we've got the Logic apps over here, and obviously I've graded them out because they're real Logic apps. But here you can see we've got our failed runs. Now on Azure, there's a few challenges you're going to have about monitoring this scenario. So here in Turbo 360, we're doing a test of the failed runs API. So we're querying the run history, looking for failed runs for a given period of time. But if you notice, the key one is we're not looking at the counters, which are at this level. We're actually looking at the individual workflows, and we're looking for any errors and any failures. And I actually had a workflow that we use as a diagnostic ping that we just trigger it to run every minute, and it just does a test call to the end system, checks whether there's an issue or not, and then it would, if everything's good, it returns good. So when we're monitoring that workflow here, if anything fails calling that system, that'll tell us some of our workflows will potentially start having problems. So in our case, this will handle that scenario where the key vault reference stops working, and we would subsequently have later problems for it. I think what we're going to do is have a look if there's another way to monitor those specific secrets and see if we can detect that going unhealthy as well, because I think that would add another level on top for the monitoring. But hopefully, this gives you a really quick overview of the issue that we had, how we fixed it. Just by so we used the refresh values, which really just makes it do a restart under the hood. Um, just double check your secret's still in the key vault. In ours, it was. In this case, it looked like it was more of a DNS or a networking issue when the Logic app happened to refresh from key vault. I think in our case, in the test environment, so if it was in production, it would have triggered and people would have jumped on the alerts really quickly. But as it was just in the test environment, not actively being tested, it took a while before anybody really responded to the alerts. And in that case, I think that, the error had been kind of going on for most of the day. So I think you might want to watch this because it might, if it goes unhealthy, it might take a period of time before it would correct itself. So I think in the documentation, if I remember, there's like a 24-hour kind of refresh thing or something like that. So it might, in some cases, it might fix itself, but for a period of time, that the cached value, if you change it in Key Vault, my understanding is that Logic Apps would pick the change up pretty quickly. But in this case, it had been a number of hours where it hadn't resolved it, and it mustn't have reattempted to resolve it because it isn't really thinking that it's unhealthy in Logic Apps or App Service. Thank you for listening to today's video. Hope this is a useful one and it stops people getting caught out by an issue. Have a great week. Thank you.